Welcome to the Right Side Up podcast with your hosts Danielle Strickland and James Scholl. This season is Need to Know, everything we want to tell Christian leaders about the future of the church and how empowering women is mission critical to a flourishing future. The book Need to Know will be available October 11th, but to get us started, we have many of the 21 authors to talk about the flourishing present, the flourishing future, and all things need to know. We are glad you are here.
Well, here we are at another epic episode of the Need to Know season for the Right Side Up podcast. I'm Danielle. We have James Scholl, and in the house we have Jo Saxton, the one and only, the legend herself.
Hello.
Amazing.
Yes, and we're thrilled that you're here, Jo, and we're thrilled for the work that you do, especially in this space. So Need to Know, we're really trying to say to leaders of the Western church specifically, there's some stuff you need to know because we're in trouble if we don't get to this, and the future of the church depends on it.
Yeah.
And you've done so much already. Like, you've just done so much work with, I think, the larger church but in the area specifically of leadership, I feel like, and identity. And that's what even women's identity is from the scriptures is one of the things that you offered. This is the conversation that we had that you offer in the book.
Yeah.
But what would you say, like, if you were, what would you say to a leader that's just like, I don't get it. I don't get why this is a problem. Some random male leader who just feels threatened and attacked and says, like, I don't understand what the problem is. What are some of the things you might say to him?
I would say I would start with Genesis and go all the way through. But I would, and by that, I mean even starting with men and women being image bearers and being given purpose and identity and gifts and talents and being invited to join God in what he's doing in the world. And that being this ongoing commission that we see throughout biblical history and sent and into the Great Commission. And so, and I just say, let's just start there. Are you seeing that made visible in your community? And what are you missing out? And who's burning out because we're not seeing that? And not just women, actually, in that. Men and women who are carrying more than they need to. And I know that leaders are often about impact. And they want to come from a place of impact. And it's like, well, if you want to maximize your impact, it doesn't serve you to under-resource 50% of your community, who are probably more likely to be 75% of your community.
Yes.
And that has implications on your giving, on your volunteer capacity, on your connections with the business world, in your connections with the local community, in the connections with local government. It's at a base level, it's theological sense and strategic sense all at the same time.
Yeah. That's actually one of those, that's why I often think, like, this isn't just a practical problem, because it doesn't make any sense. Like, so one of my rules of thumb is, like, if this doesn't even make any sense in terms of, like, this isn't even good for you, then this isn't a natural issue, because your brain rationally should be able to figure out that strategic, even Goldman Sachs, like, even HSBC, like, even the UN, even the World Bank has figured out that empowering women is the secret to their, this is not right. Like, governments, politics. They've figured out if we can get women in politics, we can keep the peace. We can, it's just like, this is not rocket science. So then it's like, so then why are the people of God, who should be the ones that lead this charge because of the Genesis mandate, like the clarity within the scriptures and the intentionality of God saying, this is me in flesh, male and female. This is a reflection of who I am. Why is that so hard to figure out? And I just feel like it's got to be a stronghold, like a block, like a blindness or something.
I do. And I think it does get distorted, doesn't it? Because people will say, no, we see that, but it means this and this. And it means, and I think it kind of gets a bit vague at that point. And it doesn't cease to amaze me how little about women in the Bible people actually know, in terms of how many of the stories aren't told. And if you only get Mary at Christmas, who, frankly, you should have Mary at Christmas and year round, actually, when you think of her life and you think of the Magnificat and you think of her sacrifice. I mean, Mary's also for life, not just for Christmas, friends.
Well, my Protestant friends call Mary the Catholic boogeyman who comes out at Christmas time. Boo! It's me. It's Mary.
But I'm like, if you don't see the range of women in the Bible, if you look at what they did, who they were, and what they did as they walked with God, you will see business women, you will see judges, you will see advisors to kings, you will see, you will see mothers, you will see daughters, you will see women whom you don't know anything about their marital status and their whether they've had kids, because it's not the most relevant thing about them in that space and in that moment. But if you don't tell those stories ever, if they're not part of the message series, if they only come out on Mother's Day and Christmas, then it kind of reduces what an image bearer looks like, because there's no picture of it.
I made a mistake this year, and I have one rule about women preaching in church. There is only one Sunday women aren't allowed to preach at Wellspring, and it's Mother's Day, because I can't stand that that's like the one time they're like throwing this token offering. So I'm like, there's only one day, and I accidentally had it so that a woman who had kids preached. I was like, oh no, I broke my own rule.
Like, no,
I can't contain them.
I was really, they've taken over.
I thought maybe you were going like, if ever there was a day for women to have a break, it's on Mother's Day.
I would say she wanted to speak that day, and so that's how
great.
I honored that. Absolutely, I agree.
I did refuse to speak on Mother's Day one time just because that was the only date that would work for the church. And I quickly was like, oh, I see. So I was like, it's okay.
I do think sometimes it's like, actually, if I do get invited, I tend to turn it down because I want to be having fun.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm like, no, me and my kids are
but it is
fun.
Right, but you are. I mean, it is tokenism, is what we're talking about here, which is kind of like
the only day, I think when it's the only day, and it's seen as a concession in some way. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are women who are knocking it out of the park on Mother's Day.
And God bless them.
Like in your case, James, and stuff. Someone's knocking it out of the park, but it's not about that part of it, is it? It's the decision behind for the rest of it.
Oh yeah.
Now, Jo, you've been doing this as a collective and really just raising up women, supporting women, coaching women, collaborating, networking women. Talk to me a little bit about what you've been learning there. And I know that you and I have talked outside of this podcast around just kind of like women are just leaving the church because they can't use their gifts. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Because I think that's a really important, like if there is no place for women to use their gifts, they're leaving now. Like I think before they used to be like, well, I'll just be obedient and stay, and that's over. So talk to me about that and the alarming reality of that, and maybe the potential of it or what people could do in that space.
I'll start with when we, there was a point when we were doing tours for AZA Collective in preparation for an AZA, it's a leadership intensive we do, and we were meeting in San Francisco. So we did a tour in some different spaces, and one of those dates was at Microsoft, a women leaders luncheon and meet and greet kind of thing, and sharing with the women and talking with these dynamic leaders who are from across Silicon Valley. And a woman came up to me at the end and she said, in this room, there are at least 4 women who have influence over about 1 billion people each. And she pointed to, and she named all, the big names, Meta and Google. And she said, the church doesn't see us. The church doesn't see us and doesn't come alongside us. And isn't strategically thinking through sending out people to pray. And it was wonderful to see these women gather around each other and pray, but also this disconnect that they'd had with the church. I remember another leader saying to me, and a business leader saying, the church knows what to do with my money. It doesn't know what to do with me. And she's happy to give her money because she's giving it it's part of an expression of her faith. But there's a disconnect again. I read some data from Barna, and now the Barna guy's going, Jo, be accurate, please. Like somewhere between 22 to 25% of Christian professional working women don't do church anymore. And again, these women I met in Silicon Valley, the women I met at Aza, they're not, some of them go to church, but some don't, and some haven't for a long time. They said the gatherings are at times where I can't be there. I'm working. I'm really glad that you've got those groups, but I'm also here. And the notion that a work thing is a choice for everybody, you know, some of these conversations about whether a woman's at home is a real privilege, and a privileged conversation, not a...
What do you mean some of these conversations, like commencement speeches with football players?
I mean,
Oh, let's go.
Telling women who are getting their degree and whose mother is a doctor that they really deep down, their deepest impulse is to be mothers and stay home.
You know, I'm
2024, ladies and gentlemen.
Also,
2024.
there are nuns in the room, dude.
Yeah.
In the room. Respect your sisters. These women who've given their entire lives in the mission of God, who have been part of this educational institution, and you know, as a Catholic, that this is a significant part of your denomination, and that's what you said in their presence. The levels of disrespect. I think that's
and disconnect. I think that when you said that, there's a disconnect. That's why it triggered, because there's a disconnect with this guy's idea of what women's identity are. There's a disconnect between this guy's own life experience with a mother who was working and doing beautiful good in the world. There's a disconnect between him and his colleagues and his peers who are taking degrees that are, you know, there's a disconnect between him and his faith and like the Catholic system of like making a way for women to vocationally serve in their gifted. So it's just like, there's so many disconnects there. I'm just like, dude, are you like, and that's what I think that's maybe one of the greatest dangers, is this disconnect from even knowing how to engage with women in the marketplace, even knowing how to engage with a level of leader that's influencing, you know, hundreds of millions of people. You know, just a very fascinating, there's so much disconnect.
It's sobering as well, because it's not neutral. It's not neutral. And again, when I think of leaders and I think of pastors or nonprofit leaders, they often think about impact, and they often think about the spheres of influence. And that is not limited to one group of people. And so it's like, how do you think you're going to impact? You're kind of it's like an act of self-sabotage.
Yes. And
you may think it isn't, but actually in practice, and these women aren't necessarily leaving loud. They'll just go. They'll just be something else that'll happen, and they'll just go. And you've missed the family member for a start. You've let a sister walk out the door. You have, financially, but also the woman who's an entrepreneur and business leader and who wants to connect in your community. There's all kinds of things that could have been part of that would have expanded and elevated your impact. Most of your people have jobs. Most of your heroes of faith have jobs. If you're thinking of your mission, most of people are spending their time at work, and you're ignoring those people. Again, disconnect.
And I think that's true of, in general, of the church, like trying to keep people coming instead of actually sending people out. And so that's true in general. And then it's true extra for women, because it's like, we can't engage with women that way.
Sigh. Yes, it is. It's sobering stuff.
What has been the greatest help for women? Like, so you've had a lot of success and a lot of stories of women sort of coming alive again in their missional calling in the marketplace, in their own leadership capacity, in their networking and collaboration. Like, tell me, what are some of the tools that have been most effective at actually raising women up to do what it is that they're meant to do?
I think it's multifaceted. I think I do think that actually, for women of faith to see that they are not an anomaly is a huge piece, because there is so much energy that's taken from just thinking, should I do this? Could I do this? So even one of the things I do at every ASA now is just have a list of women in the Bible. and I just put it on screen and say, she did this, she did this, she did this, she did. Because it's like if you see this as a text which it speaks to your life, and it speaks to potential, then there's something in those stories. So I think, and that's done a lot for identity for people in terms of, I'm not a weirdo. This isn't a concession. This is how I'm wired. I wasn't the only one wired like that. This is a multi-ethnic, multi-generational, multi-socioeconomic groups represented here. Okay. So, I think that's been a positive thing. Leaders who listen, I think there is a profound amount of leadership that happens by listening. And listening to someone else's story, listening to someone else's experience, listening to the rhythm and the pattern of their life. They used to, James, I don't know if you remember this from the era of the UK. There was one, it was a nursery rhyme, and it was very inaccurate, and it talked about the rainbow, and it was like red and yellow and pink and green. And that one.
Yeah,
and
orange.
I can sing a rainbow. Do you remember that one?
Yeah.
Sorry, Danielle.
That's interesting singing, James. Is that a UK thing, or is that just you? Like
that's my ineptitude. Not.
Give us a proper song. Give us a proper song.
I heard the melody. I heard it. Yeah, and there's a line in it which is listen with your eyes, and sing everything you see. And I think part of the listening is in the conversations, and part of the listening is in the observations. Observe the culture. Observe what's happening in the world around you, and recognize that it's not over there, it's right here. Observe the people in your community and what they're doing. Observe the people in your network, because all of those things will inform us. And again, as we think of our mission and our strategy to reach, what does it mean in the context of this group of people? So I think that's listening has been a massive, and for those women to be heard, to be seen, like those women I met in Silicon Valley. They are seen. They're just not seen by in the context of their church. They're seen in their employment because they were really high up in their company. And they were valued in those spaces. They were paid accordingly. They were on promotional tracks. There were lots. And a lot of the women I meet at Aza say, it's not that I don't get leadership development. I get it at work. What I don't get is the integration of faith and work. And I'm hoping for a space which acknowledges my leadership and my faith, because I want to live an integrated life. And so I think the listening piece is key. Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
And thinking about your chapter from the book, which is also based on a podcast we did together. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Also, this is based on a podcast the three of us did, and I don't appear in it at all. I'm like, I must have listened well that day. That's. So there you go, guys. You just shut up and let brilliant women talk, and that can be your contribution sometimes. That's okay. I think there's so much about you say, sorry, I'm going to quote you from the book because I really like it. It's like, the reality is we don't rise beyond what we believe to be true about ourselves. And so much of the time that, again, if what people's experience of church or whatever it is the stupid kicker guy telling them, this is what you're created to be. I mean, not only does that also, not acknowledge fertility struggles. We should do a podcast about that, because the way that we have minimized women into a certain role and all the horrors that go along with that. But it's also, it's so fascinating to me that we then I guess we can call it gender essentialism, right? There are some things, and these things are just female, and these things are just male. And if you're doing these things, you're just being a bit of a man. And again, another great line from you, Jo, is there've been years of people hoping, could you just be, this is Jo talking about herself, could you just be a little less black? Could you just be a little less woman? Could you be a little less emotional, a little less this, a little less that? And we love you, but could you just do this? And now I realize that when I do all those things, when I try to be what others want and expect, I'm being made in their image. I'm not living as God's creation anymore. I'm your creation, a creation that feels palatable to you. That initial revelation of the word Aza and its implications in my life and heart and mind was peace. I think that just celebrating, if women are not told that they can and should and will be strong, then they often aren't able to be, or they just, I remember this is years and years, probably like 15 years ago, when I was first getting into Christianity, and then I learned it's like, oh, by the way, there's churches that like think women aren't people, and I was like, that's stupid. But
well, because James, also your mom, like your family unit, coming from a non-Christian background, is like, your mom's like a doctor or something.
Yeah, my mom's a doctor, and my dad like retired early. So like, and one time someone said to my dad, like, you're not worried that your wife like is the breadwinner? My dad like laughs. He's like, it's amazing. What are you talking about? Like, she does her job, she loves it, and we have money. Like, what are you talking about? Why would I?
Right. So I find that so fascinating, because when you went to the church, and then the church is going like, oh, that's not good, but you're like, oh no, this is good. Like, I've literally lived this, and this is.
And also, I mean, so my mom goes to church, and my dad doesn't. So I'm like, well, if my dad's the head of the household, guess what happens, right? But I think that's so fascinating, and what it looks like to when we give people opportunities and when we empower people, like amazing and beautiful things happen, right?
I was in one of the other episodes, we were talking about the erasure of women from the Bible, and then also from church history. And one of the things, and this is reminding me of that, because one of the things that happens, and I think this is true of all minorities and oppressed and marginalized people groups, but you have to keep reinventing the wheel. So because it gets erased every generation.
Yeah.
So you're like, I'm the first woman, and then you're like, no, I'm not. Oh, wow. Yeah. Actually, there was a woman who wrote Hebrews, so it turns out I'm not the first theologian in the church, and it goes on and on. Like, and I was at an event, and they come out of the Southern Baptist movement, and they were just saying to each other, it was kind of a kindness they were trying to do, but I was like raging at the back, because they were just like, look guys, we're the first generation to do this, so like it's going to be hard, and I was like, my hands up at the back, I'm like, guys, like even within your own denomination there are women who've gone before you, they've just been erased, so like Lottie Moon, maybe look up her, like she's literally like been saving the nations while her denomination's been telling people women can't lead, so I'm like, even within your own context, they've just been erased. So it's just that idea even of like putting those names up, and that idea of like people can't rise to what they don't believe they can do. So something about lifting that. So I even wonder, like for male leaders right now, even paying attention to that, because I think, like I went to an event that was called Hero Maker, and I remember the idea is that it's not about you, it's about the people that you empower, and all the stories were still male. Like they were empowering, but they were all male. And then I just was like, who discipled Bill Bright, Billy Graham, the guy that founded YWAM, I can't remember, and the Navigator guy. I'm like, who's the person that actually is credited in their own biographies of being the game changer in their life? Guess who? It was a woman, everyone. It was a woman who's never ever named, right? The small group chick, the oh my gosh, I want to say Henrietta in the West Coast in California. She did the whole Sunday school explosion stuff, and she did these small groups and had this leadership retreat center. And almost all of those men had private counsel and divine revelation in a meeting with her.
Wow.
And I mean, literally nobody knows. And so again, it was like everybody was like, what? Like, I haven't even heard that story, So even that idea of like, raise the bar, like tell the story, celebrate the witness, so even pay attention to the illustrations you're using, the stories you're telling.
Yeah. I think it's huge. Maybe when you're, the leaders that you mentioned, when you're looking at, when you're sharing, when you're teaching and you're doing a sermon series, is it always a dude?
Right.
Is it, right. And what perspective, what perspective are we using? Like, when did you last talk about Huldah or Lydia?
Right.
And, I get that there's a sense in which, well, maybe you're going chapter at a time. Well, if you get to Acts 16, you'll find Lydia there. But will the story be about Paul? Kind of, it's that kind of thing.
So, like Priscilla turns up a bunch and she's rad. Like this.
They're in there, and I think it's just a great starting point.
Yes.
I think it's interesting as well that you get to be intentional about it or not, and we've said this before, but people are like, well, we just don't have women available. The women don't want to preach. It's like, well, maybe I wonder why that is. Like, is that because you haven't empowered them, or is it just because empowered women don't want to be around you? Like, I have loads of women that want to preach at Wellspring. It's amazing, and they do, and it's great, and we're so much better for it. Like, of course we are. But yeah, even seeing those examples, as you say, like, are you quoting female theologians? Are you drawing on those like majority world voices? Like, what does that look like? Because if you keep on quoting old white, a friend of mine who's a prof at Wheaton, and he's Filipino Canadian, and students have said to him, like, I just didn't know this was an option. Like, Filipino students who are just like, I had no idea. And in fairness, he's the only one. Like, he is like, so it's not surprising that they have it. It's like, if they're not in his class, they're like, well, of course I can't be. Like, people rise to what they see, right? And
and what you celebrate. And if you celebrate and what you affirm, and what you celebrate, what you invest in, what you acknowledge, what you pay for.
Yeah.
And
What costs you money?
What you invest in, right? What you invest in.
I think it's huge.
I came across this disturbing statistics when I was writing Better Together, and it was that the most confident a woman will be in her life is at age 9.
Yeah.
That's the confidence peak in women. So then puberty, does a whole number on women, and then culture post puberty and during puberty does a whole number, and then I would say the church exacerbates that. So that's a really fascinating. So you get your 9-year-old kid who's just like, I'm gonna be the president, or whatever, and then just a steady decline from then until you and I, Jo, we're in places all the time where we're trying to empower women, and it's just trying to get them even to reimagine the possibilities of what could be in their lives. And so this actually leads me to not seeing women in their identity. So women not seeing themselves limits them. Not seeing women the way they were designed to be limits the church, limits and disconnects us from one another. But I would say it's even worse than that. I think that not seeing women the way they were designed to be means that you're seeing women differently, means that this is going to go bad. And this is what we're seeing right now is a culture of abuse being exposed, and like just toxic behaviors and practices in leaders, and particularly in female leaders. You've experienced this. I've experienced this. We've been all witnessing to this. How much of that is how prevalent is this in the women that you're gathering and coaching and teaching?
It's interesting because at first I didn't know, but I think I've come to, and the reason why I didn't know was just the level of conversation, like who's going to go first, who's going to say first, what's happened. And, but I remember I used to run this online coaching community, and it was a couple of years ago when it almost felt like kind of crisis of the month of some leader being exposed. And it wasn't those stories, but the rage, and then the stories they would tell of sexual harassment, of financial exploitation, of sexual harassment and financial exploitation, of various forms of abuse, that made me then think any conversation we're having with women leaders also has to include a conversation on power.
Yes.
On power.
Yes.
Because so many of these leaders, had either the one-off or was dehumanized by the sexual comment from a leader, was marginalized because of this kind of reactionary culture which said, well, women can't train with men, and actually just meant she was sidelined and never got invested in. Or had someone say, well, they're raising kids, so they're supporting their family, so they've got to get paid more. Or and it has become it's like it's been the wallpaper of every ASA gathering. Do you know what I mean? It's been the soundtrack of every coaching community. It's there, and it's not. And I like the fact that you said a culture, because there are those of us who've had the devastating experiences of some really inappropriate interaction. There are women who are clawing their identities, and frankly, families that are clawing their identities back together because of what was done to a woman in that family. Because let's not pretend it only affects her. Do you know what I mean? And although that would be frankly big enough, but there was those stories. But when you're in the culture, it's the how they feel as they watch those women questioned and undermined. How it's like what you bear witness to when it's your friend, what you bear witness to when you see online people say, well, should this have happened, should that have happened, or when you see a leader rise back up again way earlier than necessary, and say, I believe in restoration, but what about her restoration? Did we check on that first?
Oh.
And also, by restoration, do we just mean your ministry's back, or do we mean that you're actually you're whole? Like you've actually acknowledged the harm and made restitution, and like it's also that what do we even mean?
Ourself is usually what that means.
Right,
it's like
exactly.
We've done what we need to do, so we don't feel bad about this.
Well, and a couple friends joined in. Like we've absolved our friends with a couple friends. Yeah.
Do I believe in redemption? Yes, I do. Yes. I do.
Oh, 100%. Redeem it all.
Exactly, redeem it all. What's her story? Why aren't we? Has anyone checked out? How's she doing? How's she feeling? How's her family doing? No, we're not asking that. Then that tells us something. And when I say us, not just us in this conversation, but all of us who are watching, all of us who have watched this, who have given witness to this, we're saying what we believe matters. We're doing what we actually believe in. And so I think it's just been a really sobering reality to have to. I mean, my gosh, have you held the hand of someone who's been abused, who's dealing with it, who wants to throw up as she recalls the memories? Have you had to listen? Have you held them during their trauma? And because it is trauma. Have you talked with them as they've tried to work out how they move forward in their marriage? And they've tried to piece together their lives, but they're haunted by the flashbacks, because that's what we're actually talking about when we're talking about these abusive circumstances. And when we're dealing with financial abuse, are we? And this woman who's given all her time and has been underpaid, and now is looking after her mother, and now is looking after her father, and is now trying to pay for her son's hockey game and all the costs of all of those things, and are practically doing all of those things. Are we still good with it now? Because it's not. These aren't slogans. These are lives we're talking about. These are people. These are people who may be in your congregation. And no, it wasn't on your watch, but it wasn't maybe on the last church's watch. And so it's important that we're aware of those things, and what happens when we gather in these spaces is that these things get spoken of, and some of the most terrifying ones are when someone hears a woman talking about her story and what happened, and a woman is like, oh, up until this point I have rationalized all of this, I was told all of this, I kind of got with this, but now when you say it like that, why is it resonating so painfully with me?
I think, when, of course, the things really blew up with the meeting house in Bruxy, and Danielle caught it like she saw it, I feel it was like every day you got a message from someone saying, oh, it wasn't an affair. Oh, I was abused. And just day after day after day after day. And
Okay, we've kicked off a season called Need to Know, and the reason we've done that is it is in conjunction with Need to Know the book. Now, there is a website you're going to need to know, which is need-to-know-book.com. A lot of dashes, need-to-know-book.com. The link will be in the show notes. And this is where all the things will be. Get this book into the hands of every leader that you know, because this is need to know for every Christian leader about the future of the church and how the empowerment of women are a big part of that. So go there, read this stuff, write the reviews, and spread the word and help us get this out. There's really no use. And actually, I'm a little bit tired of talking about this stuff, but it not being heard by the people that need to hear it the most. So we need help. So if you'd like to join our launch team, you can go to the website and just press launch team and join us. There's lots of perks in there, but also a great company of people who want to spread good news everywhere. The other key area that you could help us, and I'm very excited about this, is there's an ally section. Allies. Now, men come to me all the time these days and say, I am all for this. I think it's essential conversation. I think it's an essential practice, but I don't know what to do. Well, here you go, guys. Here's something that you could actually do. Be an ally. And there's an ally section. What the allies will do is use the book as a resource. So start book studies locally or on your web platforms. Highlight in whatever way you have, either in your pulpit or in your Bible study or your home group or on your podcast, a couple of authors in the book, a couple contributors, which there are 21. So there's a plethora of experts on various topics. And then just genuinely stand in solidarity that this is something that needs to change for the future of the church. So if that's you, please ally. Now, you don't have to be a guy to be an ally, but boy, that would be good. So we have a good start, but I would love there to be 500 allies. I mean, why not? And it is time, actually. Women can't just from the outside keep, shouting. I mean, we will, but we can't keep shouting. We actually need allies who will help us get this message out and embed it, get it in to the cultures and to the system. So anyway, this is what we're calling you to, but launch team, please help us, and allies. We need you. Need-to-know-book.com. Now's the time. Here's a really good idea. Listen, really listen to the people. Not the problem, not the principle, to the people. Listen to the people, because if you listen to the people, you'll begin to actually see patterns. You'll begin to actually put together what's actually happening. And I think that's the moment we're in, is the people are finding their voice. And as the people find their voice, more people are finding, it's this spreading, light spreads, right? Light spreads. Yeah. And I would say too, if you're afraid of the light, that's a good sign that something's terribly wrong. If you're the carrier of the light, this is the church is the carrier of the light. And if you're afraid of the light, whatever the light is, the truth, revelation about your finances, about the way you treat women, about your sexual history, about your abusive tendencies, if you're afraid of the light, something's terribly wrong. I just that is a sign right there. And so even that, even when I talk to pastors saying I'm afraid of being accused or something like that, I'm just if you have not abused anybody, there is nothing to be afraid of. You know what I mean? Why are we so afraid of light? Light should be one of the ways in which we walk. But anyway, it's fascinating to me that we're so terrified of the light. Mm-hmm. Tell me some other things about your Ezra intent. What are your hopes for women, and what are your hopes for the church in this season that's really hard to get our hopes up? Yeah. It seems. Maybe it's just me, but
according to the last half hour anyway.
Well, I think my hope, I see Ezra as a catalyst, not an end in itself. I think I like to say we retreat to advance. Do you know what I mean? You pull away and then you get back to your world, and it gathers women from across industries, some in ministry, some in business, some in the military and law enforcement. And the goal is that they connect. They have a moment where they are affirmed and encouraged, kind of dust each other off, but also build relationships and then get back to what they're doing. Because it's not to build an entity in itself. I don't know that it's a movement. I think it is designed to be a catalyst. It's to catalyze what God has done and in their lives, what he's always been doing, and to maybe give a fresh picture for it. So my hope for women is that they go back to their spaces empowered. Maybe there are some courageous conversations they're going to have. For some people, it is appropriate to leave their jobs. For others, it's to say, thank you for being the kind of place where I can be myself, because I heard some stories, and to recognize that, we need these spaces to stop, regroup, and carry on, and to keep dreaming. And I think there is a great encouragement in seeing people like you and realizing, and people who are not like you and like you. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Very different from you, but leaders too. And so I think the ongoing intent is to just to keep on empowering. We have been under-resourced for way too long, way too long. And that has eroded people. You know, you were talking about hope, and I was listening to a podcast with Brené Brown was in, and she was describing hope and said sometimes people think hope is an emotion, and I think she said it's a cognitive function or something like that. But she gave 3 points, and she said for hope to actually work, you've got to have goals, you've got to have a pathway, and you've got to have agency. And when you don't have those things, she said, don't be surprised if people are hopeless. If you've got nothing to aim for, if there's no way to get there. Because we've all met people who are like, yeah, I feel dreaming, but I don't know how it's going to happen. And that can be really debilitating. God's placed all these things inside of me, and I just don't know what to do with it. Well, awkward.
Yeah, that's hope deferred, right? That's hope deferred.
Heart sickness. Yeah. Heart sickness.
Makes the heart sick, yeah.
And then if you have no agency, if you feel powerless, if you have been shoved to the margins, if you have been overlooked, if your voice, and you know that word voice and vocation are related. Do you know what I mean? If that sense of vocation has been pushed to the side, agency's gone. You don't even get to play your part in the Great Commission because someone says you can't because you're a sexual threat. I remember a woman saying that to me. She said, I'm just tired of being seen as a sexual threat. I'm just trying to get on.
And also just like, I feel that might be, like, what does that tell you about what we teach about bodies and about sexuality and like everything like that, right? Just you existing is a threat. Like, well, I can't exist any less than I am. I mean,
what's she supposed to do with that? And I mean, and then even if you've got all the talents, if you're in those, like, words are powerful and people's and our actions are powerful. So I think my hope for erasure and my hope for those women is that they get a glimpse of glory, that it's a thin place. It's a thin place where it's like, remember, this is who you are. Let's go. This is who you are. This is what it could look like. It's not Disney, so we're not expecting it to be easy, but it is possible. And I think that's the thing I come to again and again and again. And I do hope it's a time when things come to the light. You know, I remember in the UK, a guy was talking to me about, I think maybe Me Too was more in the news. And he said, you know, I think these whistleblowers are prophetic. He said, I think they're prophetic voices. And he said, I wish we would listen. And he said, I think it's important for us to listen because I think there's a prophetic thing here. He goes, the risk that they take, the cost that it is. He goes, we've seen that before, but it's in the prophetic voices who talk about injustice and proclaim what's going wrong and say that God's not pleased with it. And he goes, I see the correlation.
And we kill our prophets. So
well, also true. And so I think my prayer is that those voices who need to say, look, there is no peace here, get to say that. There is no peace when I'm being financially exploited. There is no peace when I'm being overlooked or when I'm asked to train the pastors rather than be the pastor because apparently I can't be on. There is no peace here, actually. Or do you know what I mean? I hope that there's a space where they get to articulate that more and then find out what God's saying next.
And as we kind of alluded and what you said in lots of different, brilliant, profound ways, this don't let anyone define you there, right? It's like, well, women aren't this or women aren't that or women aren't this. It's like, no. Like, you don't get to take that, and we get to look at the nature of God as well and look at the way that the feminine imagery for God, explicitly feminine imagery that's used for God, we get to look at, and we said this on our last podcast, and I've said it so many times since then, but even the fruits of the Spirit are these things like gentleness and kindness, right? Okay, well, are those masculine or not? Because they're literally the fruits of God's Spirit being present. So again, I don't think those are feminine or masculine. I just think they're divine and do those things.
You're right. It's such a dumb conversation as well. I'm like, well, because so often it's actually so cultured. It's like, oh, but women are more gentle. And I'm like, have you been in a delivery room?
Yeah.
There's nothing gentle about. Have you been that woman who's had to get up after a miscarriage? You know what I mean? Have you been that woman who's had to go, who's fostered a child, or who has adopted a child, and you make them sound so fragile, or where women are more this or they're more that, and I'm like, are they, or is that what you saw on TV? There is. Or is that what's enshrined in your cultural context? And I'm not even saying they're good or bad. I'm just saying they're limiting when we're not actually defaulting to this range that God described as fearfully and wonderfully made. Do you know what I mean? Considered fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah, we discover that a lot, where women have actually shoved themselves into things they're not. Like, so even like Enneagram, if you use the Enneagram or whatever to find personality types or whatever, like women who are 8s have all shoved themselves into another number because they have not been allowed to be 8s. You're not allowed to be like a decision maker, and you're not allowed to be like a let's get this stuff done. You're not allowed to be you're bossy, you're unsubmissive, you're this, you're that. So you're squeezing yourself into, and so all this unhealth and like, you know, insecurity, and like you're actually operating out of a system that's not yours. Which is, so it's not even just imposter syndrome. It's like impersonation syndrome, you know, like you're literally someone you're not. And so there's so much relief. We're finding more and more and more, so much relief of women just being able to go, oh, I'm an 8. Like, and no wonder this has been hard, you know?
And don't you think, I think I heard America Ferrera say something similar to this one time. Don't you think that the reason why sometimes we feel imposter syndrome is because you're made to be fake? Right. So of course you feel like an imposter because you're not being yourself.
Right. You're not allowed. There's no permission here. There's no parameter here where you're allowed to be this. So you have to be someone else. So then, and that's this guy, Will Chung.
Like, because you're being
he said this at a church planting conference. He burned out, like full mental breakdown at 31 years old. And he said, it wasn't the pace that burned me out. It was the pretending.
Oh, God.
And he said it wasn't the pretending like as though I'm a hypocrite, like I was doing some sinful thing and pretending. It was like the pretending of the whole thing, pretending I'm like the best person in the room, pretending I have answers I don't know what to do, pretending I can lead by myself, pretending I can, you know, he's like, that's what caused me to break down is I can't pretend to be someone I'm not. And that's where you said at the beginning of this lack of understanding of how we were created together to reflect the image of God is not just detrimental to women, although they pay the first and heaviest price. It's detrimental to everybody.
It is.
Because then people are leading in ways they were never supposed to lead. So you have all of these people who are pretending to be things they were never intended to be. And that's in a marriage. I've seen that in marriages where the men are holding this like sense of responsibility and weight in a way that they were never intended to.
And they just like hold. Suck at it, right? And it's sad.
Right. Well, it's because it was never the design. So there's something, and that's why I think this chapter, Jo, is so essential, and what you're doing at Ezra is so important. And I think everybody can learn from this. Is this original image? Understand, like your identity formed by what God says about who you are is the most liberating of all things for everyone. For society at large. We appreciate what you're doing, Jo. Thanks for contributing to this Need to Know, and for doing what you do. We don't have time to talk about Nigerian, UK, American leadership life. I feel like some of the perspectives that you bring where you are so informed by all of the other things. You're not just a woman, although that would be enough because women are amazing, but mighty helpers. But you are all of those things as well, and all of those things sort of inform. Absolutely. I feel like some of what you see.
Yeah, we have a context, don't we? Our callings have a context, and I think and they speak to certain things and perspectives, and for sure it's and again I think accepting that is all, and celebrating that, and if you're from a culture which isn't always celebrated, that becomes another kind of battle.
Yes.
And a problem, but then you have to learn it's somebody else's problem, not yours. Do you know what I mean? It becomes a challenge, but I think sometimes what we forget in our own selves, because that can be a good or a bad thing. What we've decided is normal, like women are like this. Is it cultural?
Mm-hmm.
Is it cultural?
And is it subcultural? Like, is it?
And is it
cultural,
gosh,
subcultural,
absolutely.
church, subcultural? Like, how far do we go? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my word. Yeah.
Well, this is amazing, Jo. As usual, it's amazing to talk to you. We love your voice. We love what you're doing. We love your ministry, and we're for it. Where do people follow you to learn more? JoSaxton.com.
Yeah. At josaxton.com, you'll find podcast, book, you'll find information about Asa as well. Or if you are doing the socials, I don't do Twitter. I just couldn't any longer. Or X, or whatever it's called. I'm like, you know what? No. Yep. So, but everything else at Jo Saxton.
Okay, wonderful. And I'll be at the Asa Collective for a day early for an intensive on power. So if I think this should come out before then, and if it does, get there quick, because that's going to be a fun day right there.
That'll be fun. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Jo.